Weird stuff I've noticed at my Airbnb. So I'm currently staying at an Airbnb with some family before I go back to my normal boring life and have been noticing some things that just don't feel right to me. 1. There are no normal doors in the house, only barn doors with their bottom stopper removed, which make it incredibly easy to simply push them off the hinges. 2. There are peek holes in different areas of the house that makes it easy to see into other rooms without someone seeing you. But what has been the final straw for me is that last night I swear I started hearing movement in the attic of the house but have no way to check because I don't have a step ladder that can reach the entrance. Update: as I am writing this, I have just heard tapping on my ceiling. I will update this in the morning if I have not been murdered by a serial killer. Wish me luck. Before bed update, because I realized I forgot to mention why I'm not as paranoid or worried as someone who is alone might be. I have a 180-pound dog that would rip anyone to shreds if they tried to hurt me or my family, and yes, she is awesome. Seems we have a pretty good end to this little creepy encounter. I messaged the owner and he drove over to the Airbnb to look at the stuff. Explained that one of the previous renters was a bit insane in the membrane and drilled holes in the walls and how he hasn't had the chance to fix them. As for the noises in the attic, owner grabbed a ladder to let me look around and I found a big fat raccoon up there. Attempted break-in at an French Airbnb. My name's Natalia, but people call me Tally, and I'm a 20-year-old language student from Leicester currently doing my year abroad in Bordeaux in the south of France. I haven't made too many friends here. I'm not too much of a party girl like my big sister, but the friends I have I hold dear to me. I won't bore you too much with the details of my life here, but so far after the first few months nothing too eventful has happened, besides a couple of run-ins with some local troublemakers, but other than that I've had a really nice time. The food here is lovely, the city is beautiful, and the weather is a lot nicer than back home. British people making jokes about the weather back home again, haha. A couple of weeks ago we took a trip around the south, to my friend Clement's hometown Gone. There are lots of beautiful little villages scattered around this part of the countryside which are very peaceful, calm, and the people are pleasant. This is not an area that tourists typically visit. You find that the locals are often bemused to find a foreign person in this part of the country. Not too far from Gone there is a slightly larger village called Eugenie-les-Bains. I may sound like a broken record here, but this is another very stunning part of the country that probably not many people know about besides the locals. In the town there is a Michelin star restaurant and we decided to pay a visit here for my boyfriend Brad's birthday. His 23rd to be exact, and as it was now 2 years since we had met, it was nearly our second anniversary too. He had taken time off work to come to France to visit me and we were glad to be spending some time together again finally. We booked a table for 4 in the restaurant, me, Brad, Clement and his girlfriend Jeanette. Initially we had wanted to book into the restaurant's hotel as well, however it was too dear for students like us. We booked into an Airbnb instead on the outskirts of town. We enjoyed a lovely meal and then sat outside drinking wine and smoking cigarettes in true French fashion. We then went for a late night stroll through the town, enjoying the quaint little frog statue situated within the town. After we got too tired we decided to head back to our Airbnb and rest for the night before we would head off to our next destination. Clement's girlfriend Jeanette was Catholic and always wants to visit Lourdes every year as part of her faith. We eventually made it back to the room and had another glass of wine and a couple more fags before we headed off to bed around 1 a.m. I woke up at around 3 a.m. to the sound of something scratching by the door, or window. I couldn't tell as I had never been here. I wondered if it could have been a dog, or perhaps another small animal like a cat maybe. However, the sounds faded away almost as quickly as they appeared, and I quickly drifted back to sleep. Not long after, however, I was awoken again. Not because of any sound from outside this time, but because Brad had gotten up for the bathroom. I lay back down on the pillow and closed my eyes. But then a sudden sense of dread filled me up. I don't know how, but I had a feeling that somebody was watching me. I looked around the room, with only the moonlight bringing in just enough light to see. I looked over to the window, which should have been closed via the shutter, but again, with Brad not being used to the life around here, had forgotten to lock it. I could see it slowly being pulled open by a hand outside, its silhouette lit by the moonlight, attempting to open the window while holding something that I couldn't quite make out. I then heard what sounded like an old-fashioned camera shutter closing repeatedly. I hadn't heard one of these in many years, not since my grandfather would take family photos of us, but as I've heard this so many times before, it was unmistakable to me what the sound was. What felt like an eternity passed by before I could bring myself to open my mouth and yell out to Brad. The person at the window quickly began to climb down, and whilst briefly in the moonlight I caught a clear glimpse of a very distinctive ring on the left hand. I didn't get a long look at it, but it did appear to be wooden, with a distinct marking on one side. Seconds later, the assailant was gone. Brad rushed outside to try and see who it was. But all he saw was an empty street and could hear the sound of footsteps becoming more and more distant. We didn't sleep a wink the rest of the night, neither of us dared to. We checked out of the room as early as we could once there was sunlight. Claremont and Jeanette went to get the car while me and Brad returned the keys to the lockbox. I messaged the host about what happened and, whilst he seemed sympathetic, he said he wouldn't be taking any action against what happened. A few days have passed, and we still have no idea who tried to break in. Brad thinks it was the host as they weren't too apologetic, however Clement says it's because they're rich snobs and don't care about foreigners. So we'll likely never figure out who it was. The creepiest thing for me is that some perv has a photo of me lying nude in bed. And I have absolutely no idea who has it and whether or not it might end up online somewhere. Airbnb in Bali. This happened a few years ago, the year 2018. Me and 3 other friends, we were all males in our early 20s, decided to travel to Bali for about a week since it was cheap and we had to time, so why not? Our itinerary includes sightseeing, trying local foods, mountain climbing, visiting bars at the beach, basically a typical vacation in Indonesia. It was honestly quite a surreal experience. The country is absolutely beautiful and the food was amazing. The only issue I had about the trip were the locals. Drugs were really prominent there, especially mushrooms. The streets were filled with druggies dying to sell us their drugs. I am not exaggerating when I say this. One dude even grabbed my arm because I ignored his 2-for-1 deal for a one-way trip to meet Jesus. I shrugged him off while my friends laughed it off, suggesting that I may be passing up a chance to meet our Lord and Savior. He looked rabid and frantic, like he was about to pounce onto me like a dog diagnosed with rabies. I didn't feel too afraid as we were confident that we could handle them since half of them were not even sober. However, that is only the tip of the iceberg. The horror starts when we went back to our Airbnb for the night. We had an early day the next morning and were exhausted. The place was extremely cheap and it didn't even have a proper locking mechanism for the door. It had 2 wooden doors which swing inwards and the only way to lock them was to wedge a wooden block through the holes mounted on the door. It was quite a primitive lock, but it gets the job done, I guess. Everything was going well until the last night of our trip when we realized that the wooden block was missing. We looked everywhere for it but to no avail. I just figured that one of us must have misplaced it somewhere. We settled for using a selfie stick. I know it sounds like a horrible idea. Instead, since we didn't have anything that fits the holes to wedge the door close, we turned in for night, seemingly not expecting anything since we had already stayed there for 6 days with no issues. I woke up to strange clicking sounds in the dead of the night. I got out of my bed and I thought maybe is one of the guys, so I nonchalantly approached the noise. My friends were all sleeping, so I decided to investigate the cause of the noise. The ruckus seemed to be coming from the door, so I headed towards them feeling extremely confused. Who could be at our doorstep at this time of the night? I noticed the doors were slightly opened and the selfie stick was horribly deformed. I peeked outside and I saw 3 people staring through the gap between the doors. They were really close to the entrance and were attempting to push the doors open. I yelled at them, questioning their intentions, as I noticed one of them was holding the wooden block. I was shocked and puzzled at the situation as I recognized one of men. He did the overall cleaning for the Airbnbs and pathways during the day, so there is no reason for him to be there at 3 a.m. The other dude asked if the wooden block belonged to us as they allegedly found it outside of our Airbnb. I definitely smelled bullshit, as there was absolutely no reason to do that at 3 a.m. I called for my guys and the 3 men immediately ran for it. I clued in the guys on the circumstances and we stayed up until morning came in case they tried anything funny. We decided to report to the reception about their employee, but the description I gave them were not synonymous with theirs. They told me the housekeepers they hired consists of only females in their late 30s and 40s. This sent shivers down our spines as we came to realize that we had let a complete imposter in and out of our rooms while we were out. Luckily, nothing important was lost and we got out of the situation safely. I can't imagine what would happen if I didn't wake up on that fateful night as the doors were close to being opened. I was just grateful that it was our last night there. Threatened and extorted by the cartel in Mexico. I just got back from a family vacation in Los Cabos, Mexico. We stayed at a nice Westin resort, and usually around 9:30 p.m., my family would head back to their rooms to go to sleep. Naturally, as a 25-year-old, I wanted to stay up and party or go drinking at bars, but my older brother was working remotely and wouldn't go out with me. After the family went to bed, I went out to a bar around the corner from my hotel and ended up befriending the locals there and a 29-year-old guy from San Diego, named Luke, who was there for a wedding. We started hanging out every night after my family went to sleep, and on the third night of the trip, Luke asked if I wanted to meet him in downtown Los Cabos with his friends. I really wanted to, but I was at an important dinner with the family that went on later than usual. I ended up staying home that night. The next night I met him at this huge, Pablo Escobar-esque mansion they rented on Airbnb, and he told me that it was good I couldn't make it out the night before because of how scary of an experience it was. He explained to me that the night before, his buddy was taking a piss outside and someone approached him and held out a key with a bump of coke on it. Without thinking, he snorted the bump, and the person who offered it was now demanding he buy an $80 bag from them. He was drunk and refused, while getting pretty aggressive towards them. Things went from bad to worse as the Mexican who offered the bump started following their group from bar to bar for the next 3 hours, taking pictures of them. He called his friends, and there were now a group of them following behind and claiming to be affiliated with the cartel. They warned that if Luke's buddy didn't pay them, they were going to call their boss. Luke eventually went over and tried to smooth things over. They told him his friend had stolen from them and it was going to cost him his life if someone didn't pay up. The cartel member also pulled his shirt up, revealing a 9mm pistol in his waistband. Luke did the right thing and remained calm while offering to take them to an ATM and pay out of pocket $160 US so they could all be left alone. The cartel members gave him an empty coke bag and abruptly left. Even after him doing all this for his friend's safety, his friend denied any responsibility or wrongdoing and even had the audacity to blame Luke for trying to help by getting involved. He also didn't offer Luke a single dollar. After this event happened, Luke got robbed again in the same night, with a girl who ripped his $200 gold necklace right off his neck. His friend was cool to me but sounded like a real asshole after Luke explained this to me. Poor dude was just trying to be a good friend and was met with no gratitude, only to be robbed again. Needless to say, I am very happy I didn't make it out to meet them that night. I also think things could have gotten a lot worse for them had he not offered the cartel members money. Be careful out there, and never accept free drugs from a stranger on the street in Mexico, or really anywhere. It always comes with a price. The mistake I made with staying at an Airbnb. I wanted to share this story to warn people, but it is not necessarily a creepy encounter, just sort of a story that is weird and freaked me out. Please delete if irrelevant, but I do not know where else to post to warn people. I am traveling around the country in my car. I have been driving for over a week from the city I lived in and have so far slept in my car, to save money. It wasn't until I got to a big enough city that I decided to treat myself to an actual bed that would be comfortable. I opted to choose Airbnb because it is cheaper than hotels. I booked this Airbnb the day before I arrived to the city, so there weren't many options left. I had found this apartment on Airbnb that looked very new and modern, and it was in a great location. The price was decent for its location and it almost seemed too good to be true. The only downfall was that it was listed as a new listing and had 0 reviews. I figured that the price was low because it was a new listing and decided to give it a shot. Must be legit because it's Airbnb, right? When I got to the apartment building, it was older looking than I had expected. I later found out / realized that my Airbnb was, most likely, the only renovated apartment in the building, and the building seemed to be in poor condition. It looked more like a dorm hall rather than an apartment building. Anyways, I let it all slide because I wasn't paying too much, so what could I expect? The apartment itself looked like the pics, so that was good enough. Everything went well for the first 2 days. As a female traveling alone, I always make sure to be safe. I don't go out when it's dark and I always lock the door, every single lock including the chain thing. Anyways, on the 3rd day I was out all morning and came back to the apartment to change to head to the beach. I had again locked the door including the chain. I was in front of the door watching TV while changing, when the door suddenly unlocks and someone opens the door. I am beyond lucky that I had put the lock chain on the door, or else it would have opened all the way. I was naked and no one else was supposed to have the keys. My first reaction was, "Excuse me," and I closed the door right away, locking it again. I came from the back of the door and did not look/see who was opening it. I sat in front of the door, scared and shocked, realizing that this person could technically still get in here since they obviously have the keys to the apartment. At first I thought maybe it was the owner coming back after I checked out. But I was not supposed to check out until the following day, so it was not possible. After crying for a few minutes, I recuperated myself and called the owner and told her what had happened. She told me that no one else should have a set of keys other than her and I, and that she is at work and it was not her. I was scared to stay in the apartment because someone could come in. I didn't want to leave because I had all my valuables there. It was a lose-lose situation. I then called my dad, who told me that it was not okay that someone has the keys and that she needs to take care of this ASAP. So he talked to her and she told me she will be there shortly with a locksmith to change it and give me a pair of new keys. She then proceeded to tell me that she had only had this apartment for 6 months and that before I stayed there was only one other Airbnb booking. She also mentioned that it had been sitting empty other than those 2 bookings because she had been renovating the apartment, which now makes sense why the building looks like absolute shit and doesn't match the apartment. She told me that the only possibility for who that was could be the previous owners or someone related to them. Isn't that illegal? That possibility/theory really messed with me. How is it possible that I was gone all day every day and the 10 minutes I was home, during the daytime, someone tries to come in? Did they know I was there? What were they coming in for? If this apartment has been sitting empty for half a year, maybe they did this frequently. Or maybe they saw me come in and tried to do something to me. These questions are constantly on my mind. I just know I am so lucky that I put the keychain on the door, or else I don't even want to know what else could have happened. Needless to say, I won't be leaving a good review and I won't be staying in an Airbnb that has no reviews or seems too good to be true.